My name is Ashley Muller, and I work for the Geneva Center for Security Policy, and I will be your MC this evening to make sure that the evening goes smoothly. First, a warm welcome to all of you, our jury who helped decide the winning team this evening, as well as colleagues and people from around Geneva and around the world, as well as our winning team who you will get a chance to meet later on. So we are here this evening to celebrate the winning team of the 2019 Prize for Innovation in Global Security at the GCSP, brought to you by the Geopolitics and Global Futures program and Professor Nayef Al-Rodhan. And without further ado, Ambassador Dussey, Director of the GCSP. Thank you.
Okay, good evening everyone. Thank you very much, Ashley. Bienvenue à la Maison de la Paix. Welcome to the House of Peace here in Geneva. It's a place where we do research, where we do dialogue, and also a place for action. And we are very happy to welcome you to the 5th edition of the Global Prize for Innovation in Global Security. When we look at the world now, we can consider that there are two fundamental shifts. On one hand, we have an increase in the complexity, range, and immediacy of issues. And on the other, we have an unprecedented pace of technological changes. And to face those challenges, innovation, creativity, innovation is key. And this is why we have started with Professor Al-Rodhan 5 years ago, these prizes, because we want to encourage the project from all over the world who are going and helping us move in the right direction and help create a safer world. This year, we have received 181 projects coming from all over the world, and 80 of these projects came from Africa. So this is good. Africa are the top on the rankings, and we will do a ranking every year to see how we can reach also globally and what kind of countries and continent can bring the most to us.
Initially, I want to thank a few people and then maybe explain the conceptual foundations of what we do in our program and thus the need to innovate in global security, given the changing nature of global order, primarily because of the advent of instant connectivity and deepening interdependence. I'm going to shock you a little bit in terms of what we do and take home some messages. While we recognize that global security, to most people, global security is the collection of successive national securities of various states. And that is true. The state and its national security remains the most pivotal unitary act in the global system. There's no question about that, at least for the foreseeable future. I suspect that will change. But a few years ago, we decided to divide global security in a monograph into 5 dimensions, which we call the 5 dimensions of global security. So national security, yes. Human security, transnational security, of course, because of cyber and everything else and transnational crime. Environmental security, long before it was popular. And critically, transcultural security. And I deliberately picked that name of transculture rather than interculture because of the way human history has evolved. And we also advocated what I call the multi-sum security principle. And I said in that in a globalized world of connectivity, instant connectivity specifically, and deepening interdependence, no state will be able to be secure if every other state is not secure. And nobody, no matter how distant, different, or dysfunctional, must be left behind. You just can't do it, especially enabled by technology. So just to leave you home with some messages that are, I think, interesting, curious, but worthwhile. Quantum computing, which is central to what we look at. You may have, on October 23rd, which is 3 weeks ago, in the journal Nature, which is the journal, Google announced what they called quantum supremacy. I'm sure some of you may have seen that. What they mean by that is they have achieved quantum computing level. Now, as you know, quantum computing compared to regular computing or even what we call neuromorphic computing, i.e. brain-like computing, is very different. And IBM, of course, challenged that because they're working on the same thing, that they challenged the nomenclature. But what they claimed in that article is that that computer can do calculations in one day that the greatest supercomputer existing out there will need 10,000 years to do. Think about that. And there was an editorial by the director of the Los Alamos lab, who immediately thereafter, who said that whoever gets there first in terms of quantum supremacy, quantum computing, real quantum computing, will absolutely be in charge of future global security and global economics. So it's a real challenge. It's the ultimate race. The other thing that's really interesting and a take-home message is that your brain decides, and that has to do with free will and the neurophilosophy of free will, but it's relevant to security. Your brain decides what you will do 7 seconds before you know it. We know that from functional MRI imaging. So actually, which means the decision is really the result of 86 billion neurons that you and I hopefully have. But the decision is actually neurochemical and cellular and subcellular. So it's not really, the psychology is the endpoint. So a lot of it is so everything you're exposed to, interestingly, and that's real innovation because of the imaging, everything you're exposed to influences you without knowing, for good or for ill. So I think you have to be careful what you expose yourself to.
It's a pleasure to be here and to share some thoughts on the intersection of technology and security. Some years back, if you had asked, what do you think when I say the word drone, we would have normally thought of the figure on the left-hand side, a military drone, because of the use of this weapon system in counterterrorism operations, in conflicts in Afghanistan, Yemen, Sudan, and other places. Today, if you evoke the same word, you conjure up images of delivery drones, Amazon and others supplying pizza or dropping boxes of supplies, zipline moving blood bags across Africa. The point I'm trying to drive with this is that technology and its impact is socially constructed. Perceptions shift. The questions that we pose around governance of technologies, they shift with the use of these technologies and what are our perceptions of the use of those technologies. To go back to something that was said by the previous speaker. The other point that I'm driving is that governance of technologies, and there was an attempt at governance of the crossbow, didn't work out very well. In fact, it continued to be used on the margins and the norm broke down after a while, and ways were found to counter the supremacy of the crossbow, and then the arms race shifted on to the next technology. So governance is always trying to keep up with technology. Some years back, we started discussing the issue of the governance of autonomy in weapons systems. When you bring artificial intelligence, systems that learn on the basis of training data into the area of weapons, you start to change some very fundamental things. There has been a distinction between the weapon and the wielder for the longest of times. And there's also been a distinction between what is offense and what is defense for the longest of times. And entire notions of strategic stability, of what accounts for the balance of power, and what should be the laws that govern armed conflict have been based on certain distinctions such as these: a civilian object, a military object, offense, defense, the wielder and the weapon. Now, what happens with the introduction of some of these technologies into the weapons domain is that those distinctions start to break down. And if not break down, they start to become a little harder to understand. What happened with the introduction of machine learning, artificial intelligence into weapon systems? And this is still an ongoing process. So no one can really say this is a fully autonomous weapon or not. And perhaps fully autonomous weapon systems don't exist yet, but autonomy is growing in weapon systems. So what happens is that weapon systems can select and engage targets on their own. So if they have learned well enough, they can go out and engage targets on their own. There are limitations, of course, limitations imposed by the laws of physics. How long can a weapon system loiter? At what time do you need to wheel it back to replenish its power source? But within those constraints, there is increasing autonomy in weapon systems. And that poses fundamental dilemmas for the tribe of arms controllers, for international humanitarian law experts, and for military experts. When technology is developing so fast, you looked at the CRISPR-Cas example, you need to try and influence the earlier part of the tech development cycle. And you can't throw law there because you cannot. So you need to have ethical principles, guiding principles that start to influence the development of technology, that the younger generation working for Google and other companies can relate with. And you've seen the revolt of the engineers and other forms of protests or expression of views by the younger generation. So you need to put something out there early that can start to influence and shape the field. I've given you some recent examples, some historical examples, and I want to conclude by just stating some biases, stating some preferences in terms of the governance of emerging technologies. So I submit to you that first, the governance of these technologies has to be a multi-stakeholder exercise. Private sector has to be part of the discussions, not just governments. And I submit to you that this has to be a distributed, tiered exercise. So there are some things you see with those arrows that perhaps international regulation can take care of. But there are other things that will have to be done nationally. Finally, I submit to you that this scheme of governance has to be rooted in practice. If it is too abstract, if it is divorced from the practice of these technologies, whether in the civilian domain or in the military domain, then we lose the agility in terms of keeping up to speed with the pace of technological development. If we just focus on the misuse of these technologies and not on the misuse of these technologies by neglecting the practice of these technologies, then our governance approaches would not be sustainable in a global context.
After 181 applicants, 15 finalists, we finally have the winner. And the 2019 GCSP Prize for Innovation in Global Security goes to Minefields.info. And I would like to call on stage the two project representatives, Igor Bosic and Ivan Martinic.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Igor Božić. I come from Zagreb, Croatia. I'm CEO of the firm Bounty. It's a great pleasure for me to be here. My partner and I have developed the application Minefields. I had an idea to develop an application which will warn people about the proximity of minefields, which are a global problem on the world. I gathered a team of the mining men, application developer, web designers, and a lot of other people. It took 18 months to develop the application. I apologize for my English, which could be better. And now my partner Ivan will say a few words. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. When we started the project, we told each other, if we save only one life, we reached our goal. Now, when I'm standing here in front of you, I know that our application will save millions of people. I can't describe how it feels good when something that you make can save so many lives. Just incredible feeling. This award is a confirmation that our effort is recognized, that we are doing the right thing, and that we have a really great application. We hope to be able to find a solution to implement the application in all countries in the world that have the minefield problems. The biggest problem is in the poorest countries, where we will not succeed without additional help. Thank you for everything. I hope that we will see you here again.
You have developed an application, Minefields.info.
Yes.
And where was it created? When was it created? And can you explain why you think it has won the prize?
We created for our country.
Sorry, thank you.
We created for our country where we have problems with the mines. The biggest problem is when someone enters the minefields and they don't know he is in minefields. So we make application who tell him that he approached the minefields before he enters the minefields. And
so the app itself is downloadable for people in which countries?
For now in Croatia and Colombia, and we try to put new countries in the app. We hope to the end of the year we will implement 5 more countries.
In 5 more countries. So the unique part about your app is that it can be connected offline, and as well it notifies you based on a regional
because there are no internet signal in the woods.
Right,
so,
exactly.
So you can in your home download the app, and the app will download all maps in a local database. So you can go in the wood, your mobile can be in your pocket, just walking, and if you are approaching 50 meters to the minefields, you will get the signs loud and everything else.
And does your phone have to be on with the sound on?
No,
it will automatically alert?
Automatically will.
Okay. And if you get close to 50 meters and then to 10 meters, there are different levels,
there are different
right?
levels. 50 meters, 10 meters, and if you enter in the minefield, that's the biggest sound.